Hello everybody, what's going on? My name is Joseph. I'm going to be your low-budget host of the day, and today I'm going to be continuing my series on the 1936 presidential election, and I'm going to be going over the Republican candidate in this video. I want to make a correction from the last video. I stated, mistakenly, that Franklin Roosevelt and Theodore Roosevelt were brothers. This is not the case. They were second cousins. I do thank the person in the comments section who let me know this. Thank you. That's something I should have known, and I didn't. But now that we got that out of the way, please remember to like, share, subscribe to this channel. Let's just get straight into this video. So, the person I'm going to cover today is Alfred Landon. He was a Republican. He was an not really an oil tycoon, but he was big business oil guy. Lived in Kansas. Was governor of Kansas for about 4 years. Was elected in 1934, was elected in 1932, and then 1934 again, and with the hype from his election, he ended up wanting to run for president and won the Republican nomination in 1936. Now, Alfred's platform is very intriguing because it's reflective. Obviously, it's reflective of his own party's platform, of the Republican Party platform at the time, which was heavily against the New Deal. And the reason why Alfred was very much against the New Deal was he and the Republicans felt that it was a violation of the 10th Amendment, which you could argue it kind of was, because it grew the government to such an extreme degree that we're actually still dealing with a lot of what was created under the New Deal to this day. For example, Department of Agriculture did not have as much power before the New Deal. It had a lot of power, a little bit of power before the New Deal, but not as much as it did afterwards. That's a small example, but it's an example. But here's what Landon said in his acceptance speech regarding the Depression in general and the New Deal. Quote, "No people can make headway where great numbers are supported in idleness. There is no future on the relief rolls. The law of this world is that a man shall eat bread by the sweat of his brow. The whole American people want to work at full time and full pay. They want homes and a chance for their children, reasonable security, and the right to live according to the American standards. They want to share in a steady progress. We bind ourselves with a pledge we shall not ignore, thrust aside, or forget to devote our whole energy to bringing these things about. The world has tried to conquer this depression by different methods. None of them have been fully successful. Too frequently, recovery has been hindered, if not defeated, by political considerations." Now, this statement's a little too much of a generalization and not entirely correct, but that last statement where it's talking about a lot of countries in the world at the time were also dealing with the same exact depression we were. They were dealing with it a lot longer than we had because a lot of the world was still recovering from the Great War in the 1930s. One country who had managed to pull out of this slump, if not artificially, was the people we would eventually fight in World War II, Germany. They did not do it in a very ethical way, but they did recover economically in 1936 in particular, because that is the same exact year, or it was about a year and a half after Hitler had essentially wrenched control from Weimar Germany. So the statement's not entirely wrong, but it's not entirely correct either. So that's what I'm trying to say. But anyways, what Landon is saying in this statement overall is that we've tried too many methods, and the American people do not want to just continuously be given handouts. They don't want to be told, well, we're not going to give you full pay because we're giving you handouts. No, what Landon was arguing was that American people want to work. They want to do their job. They want a house. They want security. They want financial security, but they want it through work, because it is natural for a man to work for his goods, not just be given them. It's a psychological thing. I don't know if Landon was aware of the psychological arguments for this, but it's a very psychological thing that people, men in particular, like working for our stuff. We don't like just being handed stuff, and if we do get handed stuff, people won't admit this, but they become very depressed, because what's the point if you're getting handed stuff? I mean, seriously. But Landon's rhetoric in his speech is very similar to the party platform. And one of the things that I thought was interesting about the Republican 1936 party platform was it targeted the New Deal just as heavily as Landon did, obviously because the two are, it's the same entity. One of the most controversial things that the New Deal did was controlling agriculture. So, for example, this is what the Republican Party platform says about the AAA. Quote, "The farm problem is an economic and social, not a partisan problem, and we propose to treat it accordingly. Following the wreck of the restrictive and coercive AAA, the New Deal administration has taken to itself the principles of the Republican Party of soil conservation and land retirement. This action opens the way for a non-political and permanent solution. Such a solution cannot be had under a New Deal administration which misuses the program to serve partisan ends, to promote scarcity, and to limit by coercive methods the farmer's control over his own farm." So, what was the big controversy with the AAA? Well, the AAA was one of the many alphabet agencies that was created under the New Deal. This particular agency, which was located in the Department of Agriculture, essentially gave the Department of Agriculture the power to fix prices of farm goods. So what the AAA did was they would tell a farmer to produce this much, a certain amount of wheat or cotton, for an example, and if you produce too much of the cotton, you have to get rid of it. If you produce too much of the wheat, you have to get rid of it, because we don't want what happened in 1929, which was where the wheat prices crashed because of how much wheat and how much farm goods were being produced. It wasn't just wheat. There was a lot of good produce that had to get thrown out because the prices plummeted. There was and it was a year, at least in my region, where it was raining. And of course, it was one of the last years that was the case, because by about 1932, this region was in the Dust Bowl. And that, of course, was something else that the Republican Party was wanting to address, was, of course, the Dust Bowl and soil conservation. The idea of soil conservation had been thrown around quite a bit in the 1910s and 1920s, but really picked up steam during the 30s, obviously because of the ecological disaster that was mostly caused by poor farming practices. And the Republican Party, of course, at the time was wanting to implement these, but the Republican Party did not want to implement it using the federal government. They want to implement it using voluntary sales to state governments, so that you could have stuff like state parks, so that you could have watershed areas, flood prevention, reforestation, recreation, anything that would at least somewhat preserve nature. Now, all this combined with Alfred Landon's campaign should sound decently good to some people, and in fact, it sounded good enough to some states that Landon only won 2. Yeah, Landon actually got blown out by a long shot in 1936. He only won 2 states. The rest of the country went to Franklin Roosevelt. But Landon's rhetoric is interesting because it does address a lot of the controversies that were surrounding Franklin Roosevelt at the time. And obviously in the next video, I will really go into Franklin Roosevelt, and I will also give you my opinion on him as a president, because I don't like him. I blame him for a lot of what we have right now. The monster of a government we have right now really took shape under his presidency. But, of course, addressing this was the Republican Party at the time, who were, at the time, very pro-smaller government. I know that's not true for everybody, but they were mostly pro-smaller government. And the New Deal was growing the government to such an extreme degree that the Republican Party wanted to try to squash it. There were actually some Democrats, too, that were against the New Deal. It wasn't just Republicans. Conservative Democrats were very much against the New Deal in some ways, because they felt it was a huge, huge overstep of federal power. And unfortunately, it just was not enough support for Landon. Landon was not a household name. The only state he was known for was, of course, Kansas, and he didn't even win Kansas. Yeah, it's not a good sign whenever whenever the state you're governor of, you lose as a presidential candidate. I'm just saying. But anyways, that all aside, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope this was decently educational, and I hope this was cohesive. Please remember to like, share, subscribe to this channel, and have a Merry Christmas. Bye.